It's 1982. Iranian revolutionaries chant death to Israel in Tehran streets. Meanwhile, in the shadows, Israeli-made weapons are quietly being shipped to Iran to help it fight Saddam Hussein. The covert deal reportedly happens with the blessings of Ayatollah Khomeini. Strange? But this is just one chapter in the very complicated history of two nations who were once covert allies and are now bitter, locked adversaries. Cut to May 4th, 2025. A Houthi missile hits near Israel's main airport at Tel Aviv. This is the first ever strike from Yemen to Israel. Israel retaliates with airstrikes on Yemen, targeting Houthi bases. This signals a widening regional conflict. 12th of June, IAEA, the UN's nuclear watchdog, finds Iran non-compliant with its commitment to international nuclear safeguards. The next day, Israel launches Operation Rising Lion. Over 200 aircraft strike 100 Iranian nuclear, military, and leadership sites. Many commanders of the IRGC, the country's dominant armed force, are killed. Iran retaliates with a barrage of drones and missiles. Israel widens its strikes, targeting Iran's oil depots, gas refineries, military-industrial complexes, and of course, its centrifuge labs meant for uranium enrichment that's critical to its nuclear program. In return, Iran destroys a medical center in Israel.
You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Do you understand that?
So, June 21, Donald Trump enters the war. He orders Operation Midnight Hammer. Airstrikes are executed on Iran's key nuclear sites, Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan, using B-2 bombers and Tomahawks. Iran launches missiles targeting an airbase in Qatar that has US assets. All but one are intercepted, and there are reportedly no casualties. Countries in the Middle East announce closure of airspace. And then, on June 23rd, a ceasefire happens. Iran halts first, Israel follows 12 hours later. As I speak to you now, that ceasefire largely holds, but the war seems to be far from over. In this episode, we try to trace Iran and Israel's complex relationship over the years. We see how the recent conflict is an offshoot of the Gaza War. We try to understand whether a regime change in Iran will actually happen, whether this conflict will dampen its zeal for nuclear power. Why did the US shift from the role of a mediator to a combatant? And since it did, how does its maximum deterrence doctrine hold up? And of course, we try to gauge what lies ahead in the Middle East. Listen on, it's Thursday, the 25th of June. I'm your host, Anirban Chowdhury. This is the Morning Brief. Now, let's trace the relationship between the two countries from way back. 1948, Iran became the second Muslim-majority country after Turkey to recognize Israel de facto, although it withheld full diplomatic recognition. In the 1960s, the two countries became closer allies. They combined military strengths as part of Israel's periphery doctrine, which was a coming together of non-Arab Muslim countries to counter the Arab world. Throughout that decade and much of the next, Iran continued to support Israel primarily through oil exports. The relationship collapsed during the Islamic Revolution as Khomeini cut all ties with Israel, declared it as the Little Satan, and consolidated Iran's support towards Palestine. In the 80s, things started to get really complicated between the two countries. For example, in 1982, Israel's invasion of Lebanon gave rise to Hezbollah, its most enduring adversary, a Shiite militia group backed by Iran. But on the other hand, Israel was also selling arms to Iran in its war with Iraq, considering the latter a larger threat. It was in the 1990s, after Iran expanded its missile and nuclear program, that the relationship became all-out adversarial. In 1992, Israeli PM Yitzhak Rabin called Iran Israel's biggest threat. Meanwhile, Iran increased support for Hezbollah, Hamas, and other groups like the Palestinian Islamic Jihad in an informal coalition that has come to be known as the Axis of Resistance. Furthermore, US's invasion of Iraq in 2003 and the fall of Saddam Hussein made Iran even more powerful. In fact, Israel's most powerful regional rival. In 2006, the Israel-Hezbollah war happened. In 2015, Iran signed a deal to limit its nuclear program in return for a relief from global sanctions. Israel opposed that deal. Bibi Netanyahu, Israel's PM, called it a historic mistake. 2021 to 2023, the shadow war between them really intensified. And then, on October 7, 2023, Hamas attacked Israel. Iran was accused of greenlighting that attack. Here's Barbara Slavin, a distinguished fellow at the Stimson Centre and a noted global voice in matters of the Middle East and Asia.
Yes, October 7th certainly was an inflection point. The Israelis first went into Gaza, then Lebanon, and then the last shoe dropped with Iran. And there were a couple of skirmishes last year, as you recall, where the Israelis did significant damage to Iranian air defenses. And I think the weakening of the air defenses, the weakening of Hezbollah in Lebanon in particular, opened the way for Bibi Netanyahu to do what he's wanted to do for 30 years, which is attack Iranian nuclear sites. In the past, US presidents have refused permission for Israel to use its American-supplied weaponry to carry out these kinds of strikes. But this time, Donald Trump said okay. At least he said okay for 12 days. We'll see what happens now.
The ultimate aim is, of course, the elimination of a rival.
Yeah, it's eliminating a regional rival, a country that refuses to accept Israel's right to exist as it's currently constituted and that has historically supported Palestinians and other opponents of the Israeli state. So Iran, benefiting from, I think, the mistakes of Israel and the United States, prior mistakes like Israel invading Lebanon in 1982, the United States invading Iraq in 2003, Iran had gotten very powerful in the region.
Right.
And so I think Israel saw that as a threat to its interests, and after October 7th, set about whittling away all of these various groups that had Iranian support, and then finally hit Iran itself.
So is the ultimate aim a regime change in Iran?
Yeah, it's Israel's aim. I don't know if it's achievable. I would say it's America's aim, at least Donald Trump's aim as well. There have been a lot of threats to that effect. And if there isn't some sort of diplomatic off-ramp between the US and Iran, I'm afraid that this will rise up again. The Iranian state, since 1979, has been in an adversarial position with the United States. And there have been moments when it looked like we were going to have some sort of détente. There have been understandings and agreements, most notably the 2015 nuclear agreement, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. But the US pulled out of that one. And Iran, even though it signed a nuclear deal, was, of course, continuing its regional work, which was upsetting Israel and therefore the United States, Israel's ally.
Now, there are political commentators who have called Iran a paper tiger in this conflict and said that it is endgame for the clerics in the region. In fact, it's mentioned in almost every conversation that Iran's religious leader Ali Khamenei is now hiding in a bunker with all communications cut off. Some have, of course, opposed this view. Here's Talmiz Ahmad, India's former ambassador to Saudi Arabia, in a recent interview to a news channel.
You can describe this commentary with one word: absolute rubbish. Actually, what we have seen over the last 7 days of the conflict is that actually Iran has done rather better than what the Israelis and their people had expected. We had been told by Netanyahu that we command the skies and we have carried out massive bombardment at will, etc. Actually, the response of Iran and the massive shower of missiles has really shaken the Israeli public opinion.
Barbara, too, vouches for Iran's strength and resilience?
Well, I think Iran is much weakened over the last 20 months, but it's not a paper tiger. It's a large country of 90 million people with deep resources, human and technical. It can rebuild much of what has been destroyed by Israel and the United States. And although it has lost many of its top military leaders, it has many more. The Iranian, Guard Corps, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, has 150,000 members. And it didn't take the regime very long to replace the commanders who were killed by the Israelis. So it has resources. At the same time, there is deep discontent with the regime among the Iranian people. But I think their chances of overthrowing this government are probably even slimmer now than they were before, because attacks from Israel and the United States have tended to bring out patriotism and nationalism in Iranians who say, well, it may be a terrible government, but it's our government, and how dare you interfere?
What then of experts who have called its responses and retaliation against Israel somewhat cautious and calibrated?
No, it tells us that this is not a country of crazy fanatics or suicidal jihadists, as some people on social media claim.
Right.
It's a rational state. It has a religious veneer and it has a certain ideology and sort of world view, but it is not irrational. And so when confronted with the United States attacks, I think the Iranians wisely thought it was time to put an end to this. And so they had a very pro forma retaliation for the American attacks by hitting Jade Air Base in Qatar after warning Qatar that this was coming, warning the United States that this was coming. All the missiles except one were intercepted. No one was hurt. This is the act of a rational regime that wants to survive to fight another day.
Got it. And how do you see, or how do you estimate Iran's nuclear ambitions going forward? A lot of thinkers have said that it's not going to be affected. It's still resolute. I heard your recent podcast where there was discussion on chances of the uranium reserves having been diverted to other places. But what do you think will happen to its nuclear ambitions?
Well, I think Iran will never renounce what it sees as its right to enrich uranium on its own soil. Practically, whether it will do that is another matter. The United States and Israel have destroyed Iran's main enrichment facilities. So it may be possible for Iran to say, well, we're going to pause for a year, 2 years, 3 years, because after all, we have to rebuild. We have to rebuild our capacity. That's one possibility. Another possibility is that they take the uranium, the 60% uranium, 900 pounds of it, which no one has accounted for. They take it to some undisclosed location and they try to build a crude nuclear device. And frankly, I'm not sure which path is more likely right now.
Now, in the Israel-Iran dynamic, the US has historically been seen as playing a dual role: Israel's security guarantor and the global arbiter trying to contain Iran through diplomacy, sanctions, and deterrence. In fact, Trump's agenda of maximum deterrence, coupled with maximum pressure, is about dissuading adversaries from aggressive actions by signaling. And signaling is a key word here, that any attack, direct or proxy, will be met with overwhelming, possibly disproportionate force. Why then did US turn into a direct combatant?
Well, the fact that he's chosen to end the US involvement almost as soon as he began it suggests that he was very well aware that this is extremely controversial for many members of his base. He was elected on a promise to end the wars that are going on in the world and certainly not to start new ones. And of course, the war in Ukraine continues, the war in Gaza continues, and Israel started another war against Iran that the US joined. So he has lied to his supporters. He has not fulfilled his campaign promises. And I think he at one level, he's aware of that, even if, of course, he's always able to sort of manipulate things in a way that suggests that he is in control when I don't think he really is.
Finally, I asked Barbara what she thinks will happen in the Middle East in the next few months: war or peace?
I don't think that we're going to see stability in the region, certainly not as long as the Gaza war continues. And the Israelis have a habit of continuing to strike when the mood suits them and the opportunity seems to be there. So I'm not sure I would trust their promises. to maintain this ceasefire any more than I would trust Iran's.
So what began as shadow warfare has now spilled into open skies, burning red lines on maps that were once invisible. Iran has proxies, Israel has precision, the US has power. But none of them, it seems, have a way out. That's it for today. You were listening to this episode on The Morning Brief. It was produced by me and Rajas Naik, sound designed by Indranil Bhattacharjee and Amrit Reggie. Keep listening to The Morning Brief every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, wherever you get your podcasts. External clips in this episode belong to their owners. Credits are mentioned in the description.